The first thing they told me when I arrived was that the calendar was not to be moved. It hung in the mess hall, a thick, dog-eared block of paper clipped to a bent nail in the wall, its edges curled with damp. Every morning at breakfast, someone, usually the mechanic, Kostya, would tear off the previous day. The motion so practiced it seemed more like part of the weather than a deliberate act. No one ever flipped ahead, not even to check the weekend. "Dates have to happen to be true," Kostya said when I asked, without looking at me. It was my first winter at the station, and I still carried mainland habits. Checking my watch, counting the days until the next supply drop, imagining the thaw as a tangible point ahead. Out here, time was measured differently. The sun lingered below the horizon for weeks, returning in a slow and reluctant arc. Meals, shifts, maintenance cycles, they all blurred, unmoored from daylight. The calendar was the only fixed thing, its torn edges marking the slow crawl of the season. By my third week, I began to notice discrepancies. Nothing alarming at first. The date on my wristwatch was 2 days ahead of the one on the wall. I assumed it was a setting error. Then I checked the weather logs and found that several entries were missing, as if those days had been skipped. No one mentioned it. And when I brought it up to our chief, Anisimov, he only said, "The ice doesn't care about your numbers. Eat while the food's hot." I tried not to dwell on it, but the feeling lingered. During night watch, when the station was quiet and the wind pressed against the walls like a slow tide, I'd stare at the calendar, the thick block of untouched days. Sometimes I thought I saw a shadow on the next page, an indentation of letters not yet exposed, as though the future had already been written and was waiting to be torn free. It was early February when the first real slip happened. We'd been repairing the antenna, working outside in winds so strong the metal groaned. I came in for breakfast, hands still numb, and found Kostya at the wall. He tore off not one page but 3 in quick succession. No one reacted. The new date read February 17th. I was sure it had been the 14th the night before. "Did we lose a couple of days out there?" I tried to joke, but no one laughed. That evening, I pulled out my notebook, my own private log, nothing official, and counted. My entries jumped from the 13th to the 17th without a gap in the story. I remembered each day in detail. The ice cracking under my boots, the tea gone bitter from too much boil, the pale band of twilight above the horizon, yet they were gone from the page, as if my hand had written over them with invisible ink. After that, I started writing the date twice, once in the station's log and once in my own, double underlined. I kept a small desk calendar in my quarters, hidden in the drawer. Each morning I'd check it against the mess hall's page. For a while they matched. Then in early March, the station calendar leapt again, this time forward by an entire week. My hidden calendar still showed the 5th, but in the mess hall it was the 12th. My watch too had advanced overnight. That was the first time I dreamed of the torn pages. I saw them falling not to the floor, but into white air, drifting like snowflakes that never landed. Somewhere beneath them was a frozen plain, dotted with dark shapes moving slowly, heads bent as if searching for something. I woke with the taste of iron on my tongue. The others seemed untouched by this. If they noticed the shifts, they didn't say. I began to suspect that the station itself, its hum, its constant recycled air, was working on them, erasing the gaps before they could be felt. I tried to stay alert, but the days became harder to hold. Sometimes I'd look up from a repair task and find the light outside subtly changed, the air heavier, as though we'd slipped across a border I couldn't name. On the 1st of April, a storm came in from the north, thickening the sky to a single gray mass. We stayed inside for 3 days, rationing the diesel for heat. When it cleared, the horizon looked wrong, sharper, as if the land had moved closer. That morning, the calendar read April 10th. My drawer calendar showed the 4th. The station logbook said the 10th as well, in my own handwriting. I confronted Anisimov in the comms room. He listened without expression, then leaned back and said, "It's better not to fight it. Time freezes here, or skips. It's always been like that. The calendar tells you what day it is because it's the only thing that can." His voice was flat, but something in his eyes told me he'd tried to fight it once and lost. From then on, I kept my own time like a smuggler, in secret marks scratched on the underside of my bunk. It was the only way to be sure of myself. And yet, one morning, I found that I'd skipped a mark without realizing. A whole day missing from my private count. And I couldn't say which it was. The breaking point came in late May. The sun was finally back, circling low over the ice, and I was on night watch when I heard movement in the mess hall. It was 2 a.m. by my reckoning, though the light outside was dim gold. I walked in to find Kostya at the calendar, tearing pages one after another. He didn't look up. His hand was steady, his face blank, as the stack of curled paper grew on the floor. I grabbed his wrist, but the page tore anyway, revealing a date weeks ahead, June 14th. My breath caught. Outside, the horizon shimmered as if under heat, though the air was still freezing. When I told the others, they only shrugged. "It's summer now," said the cook, as if that explained everything. I stopped marking my secret calendar after that. It didn't matter anymore. The days were slipping whether I saw them go or not. My only anchor was the routine. Waking, working, eating, watching the light shift and the wind change. And always, the calendar with its mute authority. Then one morning, it showed a date I'd never seen before. Not in any calendar I'd owned, not in any almanac. The month name was wrong. A word that looked almost familiar but bent in the middle, as if mispronounced. The number was 38. I touched the page, half expecting it to vanish, but the paper was solid under my fingers. In the quiet of the mess hall, I could hear the faint hiss of the wind against the wall, steady and patient. No one else was there. I stood for a long time, hand on the page, until the light outside began to brighten. In that moment, I wasn't sure if the day had just begun, or if it had been going on for years. I thought about tearing the page myself, but my hand wouldn't move. The calendar would decide. It always did. That day passed in a way I couldn't measure. I worked, or thought I did, tightening bolts on the generator housing, scraping frost from the vents. But every time I glanced at the horizon, the light hadn't shifted. Shadows stayed fixed to the same angle, as if the sun had decided this was the one position worth keeping. By the time I sat down for dinner, the others seemed oddly subdued, spooning their food without conversation. I caught Kostya watching the calendar more than once, his jaw tight. That night, sleep came in shallow bursts. I kept waking to the sound of paper tearing, slow and deliberate. The mess hall door was shut each time I checked, but the sound remained, threaded into the silence like a faint hum. I told myself it was wind on the siding, the groan of the rafters, yet the rhythm was too regular. I tried to block it out, but my dreams slipped around it. Visions of long corridors lined with calendars, each page heavier than the last, bending the nail that held it. When morning came, the date was still the strange one, the one that didn't belong to any month. No one tore it away. It hung there through breakfast, through the morning's radio check with the mainland, through lunch. Even Anisimov avoided looking directly at it. In the early afternoon, I found him alone in the comms room, staring at the silent equipment. "What happens if we don't change it?" I asked. He didn't answer, just reached for the receiver, then stopped halfway, as though he'd forgotten why. By the second day, the station began to feel unmoored. The routines still happened. Meals, maintenance, shifts. But without the daily tear of the page, they floated without weight. The wind picked up, and a low-frequency vibration began in the walls, like the resonance of a distant engine. I felt it in my teeth, in the bones of my wrists when I held a tool. I started writing more in my notebook. Not dates now, just fragments. Smells, phrases overheard. The exact shade of the sky at noon, as if cataloging these details might anchor me where the calendar no longer could. On the evening of the third day, I found Kostya in the mess hall alone. He was seated beneath the calendar, his hands folded on the table, eyes fixed on the page. "It's waiting," he said when I sat across from him. His voice was low, almost reverent. "It doesn't like being ignored." I wanted to ask what "it" was, but the way he said it made me think he'd only repeat the sentence, slower. That night, the tearing sound returned. Louder now, closer. I sat up in bed, listening. The air in my room felt thicker, harder to pull into my lungs. I followed the sound to the mess hall, where the door stood ajar. Inside, the calendar page hung by a single corner. No one was there. The paper swayed gently, though there was no draft. I reached up, intending to remove it, but my hand stopped an inch short. My pulse slowed, each beat heavy. The paper smelled faintly of ozone, and beneath that, something older, like the inside of a cedar chest. I don't know how long I stood there, my hand suspended in the cold air. Eventually, I pulled back and went to my bunk. In the morning, the page was gone. The date beneath it was not the next one, nor any I recognized. It was further along. Years, maybe decades. The number was higher than 300. The month name a string of letters that felt almost pronounceable but slipped away when I tried to form them aloud. After that, the skips accelerated. Some mornings the date leapt forward by weeks, other times by only hours, but never predictably. The light outside began to match neither the hour nor the season. I saw the sun rise twice in the same day, then vanish for what felt like a month. The snowdrifts rearranged themselves without fresh snowfall, the ridges bending in patterns that reminded me of handwriting. The others moved through it as if nothing had changed. They spoke less and less, their voices flatter, the pauses between words longer. I tried to ask Anisimov if he remembered the day before, but he just looked at me as though I'd asked the color of the wind. I stopped trying after that. My notebook filled quickly, my handwriting loosening into shapes that didn't quite match my own. Sometimes I'd read back and find entire passages I didn't recall writing. Descriptions of landscapes I'd never seen. Forests of glass. Rivers that froze in mid-fall. One morning I woke to find my drawer calendar gone. The wood of the drawer front was smooth. No scratch marks where I'd carved the days. The mark under my bunk was gone too, replaced by a faint indentation, as if something had rested there for a long time and been lifted away. In the mess hall, the wall calendar displayed only a blank sheet of paper. The nail was still bent under its weight, but the surface was untouched. No printed lines or numbers. Kostya sat beneath it, his chair angled just enough that he could see the blank page. His eyes tracked across it slowly, like reading text no one else could see. By evening, I understood I'd stopped keeping time entirely. I no longer knew how long I'd been at the station, or when the next supply drop should arrive, or if it already had. The radio crackled sometimes, but only with a low murmur, the cadence of speech without the clarity. I stopped trying to answer. The final shift came quietly. I woke in the middle of what might have been night, though the light outside was a pale, steady gray, without source or shadow. In the mess hall, the calendar was gone from the wall. In its place was a darker rectangle on the paneling, the outline of where it had hung. The air was still, the hum in the walls gone. For the first time since arriving, I could hear my own breathing without any background noise. On the table beneath the empty space lay a single page. Its paper was heavier than before, the surface warm. In the center, one word was printed in bold, even type, a word that might have been my name once, or something very close to it. I reached out and touched the ink. It sank under my fingertip like soft clay. When I looked up, the walls of the mess hall seemed further apart, the ceiling higher. The window showed no snow, no horizon, only the same pale gray stretching without end. I knew, without knowing how, that there would be no more pages to tear, no more days to measure. The calendar had finished with me, or I had finished with it. I sat at the table until the light in the window became indistinguishable from the walls around it, and the air no longer felt cold. The page lay under my hand, patient, as though it had all the time in the world.